my mind a lot. Don't need no time watch. I don't know how I got you in my pocket spot. Yeah, that's babe, need you every day. You like my oxygen. Make it seem like the barging down. Got my heart no barging in. From the bed to the floor to the couch. Might wake the neighbors up. Break you in and break you out. In the end, we're gonna make it.
Deanna, welcome back to another edition of All Time High. Today, we're going to talk about the Genius Act. And I know you have a lot to say, and people want to hear what it is that you're going to say.
Of course.
But what do you think about the Genius Act?
Okay, so we haven't really...
We have had a few haters.
Of course, because everybody disagrees. But
yeah.
we welcome...
I mean, don't hate the players, hate the game.
That's right.
We will.
So, okay, so I know that this is an authentic... You haven't heard, right? So, we've been talking about, but you don't know my stance on this yet. I actually read the bill, right? So I went and found the bill itself and read the bill, and it sucks. It is not a good bill. I was really disappointed when I was reading it, the approach that they were taking for it, the parameters that they set on it. I think the reporting requirements are going to be very difficult to do. I don't know, it didn't feel good. It felt like a knock to the good old boys club and not really a free market for everybody to play.
So let's talk about it. And for those that don't know, the Genius Act basically took on the task of stablecoin legislation. And it was really it seemingly initially was a bipartisan effort, but as it got closer to the finish line, we had a couple of defectors and it really became a partisan issue with all of the Democrats voting no on the issue and 2 Republicans voting no.
Yeah. Well, which is funny because they didn't like it for very different reasons than why, I didn't like it. They have a whole other side of the coin that they're looking at as far as why they don't want to support it. Or I guess maybe it is the same, or it kind of looks the same. But I've never been pro stablecoin to begin with, so I was never going to be, because to me that's just one step closer to government control over our money. Because once we go digital, we won't be that far from a social system at that point. And with the introduction of AI, the chances of us getting there are closer and closer. So I'm glad this bill got shot down.
So let's talk about that. Yeah. And you're taking me to the nuance of what was actually in the bill. You're saying that the legislation was closer to a controlled state, or at least with them having the ability to have visibility. Was that not excluded? Because we have heard some of the people in Congress talk about the idea that government surveillance is not part of what the stablecoin bill. Was there some elements that are left out?
Obviously, they're not we're spying on you in the bill. But, there is monthly requirement. Once you have that digital trail, and we know it, that one of the biggest misunderstood things about Bitcoin is the fact that you don't have true anonymity behind it. At some point, you connect a payment to a person anytime Bitcoin leaves that network or goes to a wallet or goes to cash, right? And so now when you start talking to stablecoin, that digital trail is there.
It's permanent. Yeah.
Right. They were saying that it could be backed by the dollar, but it couldn't be a currency. So essentially the way that they said it was that the government itself couldn't issue a stable coin because according to this bill, it could not be a US currency. Right. And the whole thing before was the stable coin was supposed to be the dollar, right? In the initial thing. So then the question is, were you allowing the private market to come in here, start to play instead of government? But then they were only people with certain licenses could do it. And then you had to meet certain requirements to get certain licenses. And so essentially to me, it felt like banks were going to be able to print their own money and that banks were going to be able to transmit within, a stable coin, because to me, they're one of the only ones that would even qualify for a license. So it just felt very mucky. It didn't feel like the true spirit of crypto the way we like it.
No, not even. And one of the things that I heard Perry Ann Boring talk about this, a friend of yours, somebody I've worked with in the past, she pointed out that within the nuance, and so I don't know this firsthand, you probably read it, but that the way it read, it would not allow for the stable coins to actually provide yield. And so one of the things that's going to attract more people to the space, and that's why we're here on All Time High as we continue to grow the space, is to get more people involved because it provides more opportunity for more people. It would kind of limit the idea that somebody would get into this space and participate when you could be earning whatever it is, 4% on the dollars that you have in the bank through a CD, but not being able to secure a similar yield on a stablecoin. And
Right.
it would be ironic because the stablecoin is backed 1-to-1 typically by, in theory, the US dollar. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, it's essentially, I think stablecoins, DeFi can compete with banks all day, right? So it's
okay.
very
Yeah.
obvious that this is a superior system and it kind of puts the banks to shame. I honestly felt like this bill was there to kind of squash crypto and make it more favorable for the banks. That's how I felt when I walked away from it. So I wasn't a fan. I was like, I'm
So
not into this.
So let's take a listen to a report that came in on the bill as it was being voted upon. It obviously did not pass, but I wanted to set the table. ABC News, I think, it did a pretty fair job of providing a level perspective. Let's take a look, because one of the big issues out there are the beneficiaries. And you mentioned the banks as one of the ones that might find this stablecoin legislation detrimental to their existing position. But watch how the press kind of spun this one.
Yeah.
Key test vote today on a bill to regulate cryptocurrency. The quote Genius Act aims to create a regulatory framework for so-called stable coins tied to the US dollar or similar assets. The vote comes as Democrats are scrutinizing foreign investment in the Trump family's own stablecoin. Let's bring ABC's Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill for more. So Jay, what would the Genius Act do and how much support does it have right now?
So this is regulation, Diane, that would make stablecoin more accessible, more easily to adopt. And it's something that Republicans and Democrats have agreed on in the past, but Democrats in the Senate at the 11th hour.
Well, if you're listening at home and that seemed really fast, that's one of my life hacks. because I listen to things at 2x. So if you're listening to us at 2x, that might have been 4x for you. Let me slow it down. We got through the intro there. Here we go.
I was like trying to keep up, like
against this legislation, in part because President Trump is tied to a venture that has a stable coin as part of it. It's a venture that he's part of with Steve Witkoff, one of his top Middle East advisors, and Steve Witkoff's children, et cetera. And so what we heard from Democrats is concern that the president could financially benefit from legislation that makes stablecoin easier to adopt, which is what this legislation in part would do. So Democrats started to come out against this legislation. Republicans would need Democrats in the Senate to clear that key test vote, which is still on track for this afternoon. And what we saw yesterday into last night were behind closed doors negotiations to try to get some of that Democratic support back. It looks like they are talking about potentially adding more guardrails, or what Democrats call anti-corruption measures, to this legislation. Perhaps there are amendments to try to distance politicians from owning or being tied to stablecoin.
So let's stop there and break that down a bit for the audience, because the ownership of the stablecoin is going to be a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but here, is it because we already have it? It already exists. It's already out there. It's already yielding. It's like, we're not talking about a regulation that was then going to introduce an entirely new industry. The industry is here, right? So it was meant to open it up and kind of govern it a little bit better. In my opinion, it was actually going to squash it a little bit more. Now, how like favorable it was going to play specifically into Trump's coin, or what? I didn't even realize he had a stable coin. I mean, I know his meme coin, and whether but he's already benefiting from it. It's already there. And are we going to turn around and say now that people in Congress and representatives of the United States government don't benefit from the bills that they put through? I mean, come on.
Well, they are trying to do the Pelosi Act, where they're taking back the ability, or considering the possibility of taking away senators and congressmen and people that are in the cabinet and the president from actually owning stock, right? That's something to consider. But I wanted to pass this along, and I'm not for or against. I want the legislation through.
Fly. Yeah.
But you want to know that the presidents, and this is from a CBS News report, so I don't know if this one is as balanced as the ABC News one was, but It says that the president's crypto holdings now represent nearly 40% of his net worth, or approximately $2.9 billion.
Good for him. Good for him, because he's got to go pay Letitia James $495 million, right? So like, if he's getting creative with where he's coming up with the money of where he now has to spend all of his legal fees in the government and pay things, and good for him. Don't hate capitalism. That's, you guys should have thought of it first.
Well, but wouldn't it be better if he just tapped out for a hot minute and got the right thing done at the right time? Because that would be the right thing. Because if you do the wrong thing, even, you know what I mean? It just seems like the timing is off. Like,
sure.
Why do the legislation? Why have your thing set up before and build legislation around it? Why not build the legislation and then do your thing after?
Well, I mean, because that first off, his coin was done long before he ever became the president again, right? So like,
Well,
he
those are
didn't
meme
just
coins,
right. So when
right?
his stable coin started when?
I don't know.
This is what I'm saying. So I didn't even know he had a stable coin. So if he has a stable coin, I guarantee you he
He
didn't just
does.
all of a sudden come up with a stable coin. You know what I mean? It's probably he's probably using it to negotiate to. That's probably what they're settling Petro on now is like Trump coin because that's just how he is. But the industry. He was here. He had his things. He's been doing it. And are we going to sit here and say he wrote this bill? Like,
No.
I think the senators and the people, right? Like, it was put together by people of Congress, and so how they would know his intricacies and the way that he would benefit specifically from it. I mean, who knows?
Well, no, but
It
that's
is
my
all a
thing.
little mucky. It was just a crappy bill.
Well, let's just say, and by the way, I think yield is an incredible thing. Like if I were a Republican senator, of which I'm not, then I would have rejected it based on the idea that you couldn't include yield as part of the concept
Yeah.
because I don't think that benefits the greater good. And
Yeah.
two of the people that were against it, Joseph Hawley, who's been very pro crypto, and then the other guy, Rand, you probably know the name from Kentucky.
Yeah. Rand, but yes,
French Hill,
I
don't know. French Hill, I think. Sorry.
Yeah.
At any rate, they came out against the vote for different reasons, and they didn't really articulate it, but it was clear on the Democratic side of the aisle that the reason they weren't voting for it was because Donald J. Trump, and I think at some level his sons were very connected, from my understanding, this is Eric and Donald Jr., to the libertarian movement because of Choke Point 2.0. We've heard about Choke Point 2.0 where they took people out of banks. And you and I personally were very concerned about this, right? Remember?
Yeah.
And you've actually had stuff happen. But allegedly, from people that are in the know, and from what I've heard and seen and read, the Trumps, Jr., right, and Eric were impacted by exactly this. They were debanked in certain situations that made them say, hey, this is the way. This is the new thing to be doing. And I think it's served as a very important catalyst. But I would just encourage and ask patiently for them to wait for the legislation to get passed through, then play by the rules that have been established. Don't see how it's impeding the progress.
I actually take a very different approach to it because
let's
go back to, when lawfare was being used in our country to stop a leading candidate from even being able to go in and compete in the presidency, they seized up all his assets. Now, if he had a good chunk of it in Bitcoin, guess what they couldn't touch? So I don't think that understanding the system and playing the system and playing by the rules is a bad dig on them. I mean, to me, because they're experiencing it firsthand, they can understand the power of it. They can understand the potential of it. And I wish that they would have gotten ahead of it a little bit more in this bill and maybe use some of that knowledge and intelligence to really shape it in a better way. But, good for them. Like, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Fair enough. But as I've heard someone say, rules for thee, not for me. And as we get to this place where both sides are like, well, that side's cheating and that side's cheating, it gives everybody the kind of free for all that isn't where I want. And I don't get to choose, but I really would like this elevation of a financial instrument with digital technology to benefit not just a singular person or a singular group, but really the ecosystem. I mean, that's where the win is at.
It's open to everybody. So here's where I think the difference is. You had President Biden, whose son had dealings in Ukraine, and then all of a sudden there's a war in Ukraine and we're funneling money to Ukraine. But there was family ties there.
For sure.
And they were playing an entire system that was there that was excluded to the rest of the world, right? That was their own little ecosystem they had set up.
Agreed.
If you're turning around and taking Trump and saying that this crypto situation is the same thing, the difference being they're playing in a market that's open to everybody. They're not playing something that's excluded and saying this is us only. This was a market that they fell into. This was a market that they've experienced. Maybe they're helping develop it, but it's open to everybody.
Well, then let's get our marketing hats on and portray the concept that this is for the status of world reserve currency so that we can outmaneuver the other countries instead of, and what's happened because of the way it's gone and the way it is, we've got a partisan issue that's not really partisan in my mind because there's a bigger picture and a greater good that's being compromised because if they could have just waited a little bit longer, like we've been saying this for 3 years, that stablecoin legislation is coming soon to a theater near you. And here we are. Here we are. I can't wait to see the movie. I mean, we know, and I don't even have to look anymore. Like, this stuff's embedded. Like, what's the total asset class now? Cryptocurrency.
3.5 trillion, I think we said.
Okay. And you and I started doing this around 2.5. And in my heart of hearts, I know, not financial advice, do your own research, that this thing is going to 10 trillion. I can't tell you how fast. I can't tell you how long. I also believe
10 trillion. You said 10 trillion?
Yeah, we're at
3.4 trillion market cap. I don't know why I thought you meant Bitcoin. I was like, that's bold.
No, well, of that 3.4 trillion, 2 trillion of it is Bitcoin right now. So there is a heavy dominance on Bitcoin. It's starting to come down a little bit as Bitcoin accelerates up to 104,000. Right?
Yeah, it's 104,000 Bitcoin is right now.
And we'll start to move into this altcoin world where people are going to capitalize on the gains they've secured. Some of them, right? Probably other people will keep it for as long as they want to, and money will move into altcoins. And I will just tell you today, oh, by the way, speaking of politics, did you see what happened? So the day after the stablecoin legislation, the Genius Act fails, and I'm not making this up, this is real.
Go ahead.
Guess who started printing? Guess who's like, oh, we got another shot, another round, everybody, let's go up to the bar, because Tether is going to print some money. And Tether printed some money, and guess what went up correspondingly? That's right, Bitcoin. Hey, I'm not telling you that stablecoin legislation should have operational considerations and have audits and ways to track the money, and that the element should be backed 1-to-1. But I'm telling you, as long as we delay this thing, you're going to give Tether an opportunity to do more and more of what it is that we don't know that they're doing. We don't know what we don't know. And when that happens, when they print that money, Bitcoin goes up correspondingly. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I love it. Good. Put more money into the market, put more money. Listen, buy Bitcoin and hold on to it, because when the world gets crazy, like we just saw, you're going to want to have it. They can't take your Bitcoin if you keep it off an exchange. If it's on a cold wallet, they can't take it unless they physically have it.
By the way, did you see who jumped up to number 3 in our rankings? I mean, Bitcoin, huge percentage, roughly 65%.
No.
It rhymes, so it must be true. Number 3 is XRP.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that's what was coming. ETH did a big jump too, which I thought was a little surprising, right? Like, so good.
ETH
so the market's up. The market's up. This is what I'm saying. Like, people are not discouraged by whatever just happens. They're inspired by it because
no. So here's my thing. By what happened, we're just kicking the can on the playbook that's in play right now. And the playbook now says Tether prints, Bitcoin flies, ETH follows. And that's exactly what happened. So the next time, and by the way, this, I think it's called cloture. I may be saying that wrong, but all they were voting on was discussing the bill. They voted to reject further discussion and debate on the bill. Like, there were a lot of things that got brought up into the bill. Yeah. And they were like willing to make adjustments and further considerations and try to figure the whole thing out. But they rejected even that possibility. And one of the people, and you got to help me see this one, because I don't know what I don't know, but Senator Gillibrand from New York, who you've probably seen on stage, she and Senator Lummis like trotted out some of the very original legislation for Bitcoin and for cryptocurrency. She voted against the bill. I mean, how can somebody who's been such a strong advocate, or was it just a straight party line? Nope, we're not letting this happen.
There's a big difference between crypto and a stable coin. You know what I mean? Like, Bitcoin and a stable coin is not the same. I agree. The same thing. And I mean, it was just a crappy bill. Like,
do you want to explain that for the people that are listening?
Sure. So the difference between crypto and a stable coin is a stable coin is always $1. So the way you make money off a stable coin is either through transactions, if you're like the platform in which transactions are happening, so they make it off the fees, or if that platform allows you to stake your stable coin and get a reward. And I think Gemini was up to like 12% at one point.
So that was the yield thing I was talking about, right? Like, the fact that the legislation said no yield was like, ooh, this is not really a good thing. And that's what Perry Ann pointed out.
It crushed DeFi.
Yeah.
So a stable coin is always $1, whereas Bitcoin will fluctuate in value. And so they're not all equal. And a stable coin, again, it rivals the dollar. It was not set up for a good open market. I understand the need of control. You obviously don't want everybody running out and printing like dollars, but at the same time, they can do it right now. So what's the difference? Like, You're not helping the industry move forward by putting together crappy legislation.
So help me with this. Let's take one positive thing out of the legislation, the bill that you read. I've got one thing. You share your one thing. We got about 20 seconds left. Is there anything that you saw that you were like, this is good? I'll tell you mine while you think about yours.
Go ahead.
I think it would be good that all the banks would be able to provide the structure and infrastructure. Like it basically established a banking way to issue stablecoins, and you would reach a situation where the banks would all have their own little stablecoins. And I don't think just in terms of the big JP Morgans and your friend Jamie Dimon, but I'm also thinking of the regional banks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Was there anything else in there, or was it just like made you think there's no way they're going to pass?
Well, no. That just,
Go ahead.
that whole conversation just got me on a whole nother topic about like how banks, it's not like the dollar. And so the digital system wouldn't allow banks to move money around like they normally do. It becomes a whole new thing, but we can save that for another day. But I go back to even your positive reinforces what I said. It felt like legislation for the banks. It felt like it was putting all the control for the banks to be able to run stable dollars and to crush the open market that exists right now. And I'm not in favor of that.
And nor am I. And
Nope.
with that, we'll end this episode of All Time High.
You on my mind a lot. Don't need no time watch. I don't know how I got you in my